Hi everyone. So last class we learned about the settlement at Jamestown. And today we're going to learn a little bit about the New England settlement. So it's just a short presentation with some background information. So first let's talk about um, the plan to create a model new society. So there are some ways that the New England settlements were the same as the ones around Jamestown. There's also many ways that it was different. So the ones we already talked about really came for economic reasons, but these societies are really formed to create this new model society, this utopia in a way. John Winthrop, we'll learn a little bit about him. He was the first official governor of this area, and he wrote about making this land in New England a city upon a hill. We'll read about that later. Look at this. I have my school calling to tell me my daughter's absent because she's sick today. Um, so the idea that a city upon a hill was how it's supposed to be a model society for the rest of the world to see. We're going to read about it because he meant a few different things when he said that. Not everything was wonderful for John Winthrop. In 1633, he started to have some trouble with Roger Williams, who we're going to get into. He was part of the English gentry that came to the Americas. He was the lesser order of the gentry, but he was still one nonetheless. He was always searching for himself as well as others for signs of weakness. And he was, a big leader for many years. So anyway, the Puritans started coming in the 1620s. That's, when Winthrop came. And then the Puritans, we often lump with the Pilgrims, but they were a little bit different. The Pilgrims at the time were known as separatists. Because Puritans were their own sort of religion, and Pilgrims were the ones that broke away from it. The Pilgrims were a major congregation led by William Bradford. Almost all of them were, anyway. And this Plymouth colony that they arrived to was land. We mentioned in the other video that John Smith surveyed land up and down the coast, and he surveyed this land as well. So they eventually formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Winthrop and others did in 1629. And if you can see this map, I know it's sort of hard to see it, but there's these different areas here. And the Massachusetts Bay Colony is this here. Now, it went far west. They didn't really end up settling all of that, but that was where the grant was. So that with them, they brought the authority of an independent government where they could sort of make their own rules and laws. Boston, over here, became the capital. And in their first year, about 1,000 people settled in the Massachusetts Bay Company. They brought about another 20,000 people to New England in the 1630s. The Massachusetts Bay Company was mostly Puritan. They elected their government. They eventually traded with England and the West Indies, and even by 1652, they actually had their own mint and made their own money. So I mentioned before Roger Williams, so I'm going to get into this a little bit here. So the role of the church was very important, more so than it was, let's say, in Jamestown. Like, there was still a church in Jamestown, but remember, they didn't really come over for religious reasons like they did in New England. So civic officials were members of the Puritan church. You had to be a member to be. They had the first printing press in New England, but why did they do that? It was to train clergymen, and that's sort of why Harvard even was created, was to train people for that. The Massachusetts Bay Company even wrote about converting the natives to Christianity. The Puritans believed that God intervened on their side, especially when smallpox came and wiped out thousands of natives so that now settlers could settle in that land. Certain sins were crimes in the drunkenness, swearing, all sorts of things. They came more as families than in Virginia. You mostly had individuals. So you had some families. Here you have actual families coming to set up this new model Christian community. But you had some people that weren't 100% on board. One would be Roger Williams. He was a Reformed Baptist. He was originally a Puritan, but he became a Reformed Baptist, and people thought he was bringing new and dangerous ideas to the congregation. So he had to flee the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he was actually threatened to being sent back to England to go into an English prison. He ended up creating the Providence Plantation in 1636, and you may know where Providence is today. Providence was a settlement in what would now become Rhode Island. He was a big believer in the freedom of conscience, right? That you can't be forced to be a certain religion. He denounced mandatory worship. He argued that government officials should not interfere with religious matters. So he's sort of like one of the beginning people that acted upon these ideas of separating church and state. He was actually one of the first abolitionists in the Americas as well. And then we have Anne Hutchinson. They knew each other, Roger Williams and her. She also played a lot into religious convictions. She was at odds with many Puritan beliefs. She disagreed with things like, are you saved by grace or by works? Almost like what Luther originally debated about. She was excommunicated in March of 1638, which means she was basically kicked out of the church because of her religious beliefs. And she's now known as an important figure in women's history as well because of the stance she took and how it wasn't really respected at the time, because both how she was disagreeing with the religious ideas at the time and plus how she was speaking out as a woman. So there's a statue to her in Boston. You can look up later about that. Okay, so we'll learn more about these colonies, but this should give you the basic backgrounds of what was sort of the same and what was different about them. All right, so we'll talk to you later.